life is a game. And if I'm in the game and money is part of the game, I want to win. I want to achieve success so that money and finances is not a stressor in my life. Hey everybody, this is Travis Dillard, and with me is my business partner. I guess he's kind of like a second husband or second wife of mine. I don't know. I have more contracts with Mitch than I do with my wife.
He can't escape me. I'm never going away.
No, and he reminds me of that daily. So anyway, Mitchell England, my co-host, my business partner, co-host of the 0 to 100 podcast, and just to remind you guys, I'm the leader. Mitch is my sidekick. I'm like Batman. Mitch is like Robin Hood, but the goofy Robin Hood of the 60s, like the weird, awkward Robin Hood.
I think it was just Robin, not Robin Hood.
That's him.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway. So, you're right. Robin Hood's the guy that steals from the rich. Robin Hood is a social.
You're all confused.
He steals from the rich and gives to the poor. Right. Okay. But all right. So what is the 0 to 100 podcast? The 0 to 100 podcast, or what is 0 to 100? Man, we are all about investing in real estate. We're all about how quickly can you scale your investment portfolio. But more importantly, it's how fast can you scale a real estate portfolio that generates outsized risk-adjusted cash flow returns to replace all of your living and lifestyle expenses. We call that retirement number one, or R1. That's like our whole mission. That's what we're doing every single day, is we're coaching our elites, coaching people in our School of Scale program. How do we get people to R1? How do we help them scale in real estate? How do we get them to look at real estate through the lens of time? Meaning, should I buy this real estate that I could make $1 million on, but it's going to take me 1,000 hours? Or can I buy this real estate that I'm going to make $1 million on and it's going to take me 20 hours? So anyway, Mitch, we had to cancel a last minute cancel. I don't know if the guy like last minute cancel. We had a guest today and the guy just vaporized. I don't think he ever showed up.
I didn't see him join, so we're but this is okay. We love to jump on just us three or us two and just go talk about real estate. So
yeah, I'm glad that it's just us, because there's some nuggets of gold I wanted to tell everybody. I had these hidden secrets that I was going to share today about how to cut your scale time in half and how to make $1 trillion.
Well, you forgot them, right? You forgot them.
No,
you don't have your notes.
No, man. Well, anyway, so Mitch is in Wisconsin today. How's Wisconsin? Were you calling in from your closet studio in Wisconsin?
It is a closet studio. I try to make I situate the cameras just so you can't tell it's a closet. But yeah, I'm in Wisconsin. We're supporting family out here. It's starting to get colder, which sucks because we're gonna be in the negative 40s soon. So we're doing all the things. We're getting the boat winterized and hanging out with family and enjoying Wisconsin. The flat geography is getting a little old for me. I'd love to see the mountains again, but hey, be in the Northwest soon.
Yes, however, Wisconsin is in the Midwest. We like Wisconsin for investing. We're going to tie this back to real estate, because a lot of locations in the Midwest, for the price you pay, you're getting more cash flow. And we're all about cash flow here. We're all about long-term hold cash flow real estate. We talk about this quite a bit, and sort of getting people to overcome their self-limiting beliefs. A lot of people think they have to buy in their backyard. Normally, Mitchell is on the West Coast with me. I live on the West Coast, and the cash flow for the property you buy is pretty low, or you're going to get like a complete piece of shit. That's actually, you think it's going to be high cash flow, but it's not, because there's been deferred maintenance and there's going to be a lot of capex. So one thing we teach is overcome the fact that you have to invest in your backyard and overcome that self-limiting belief. In fact, the first deal Mitch and I did was a 1031 exchange. We both, I think Mitch did a house flip, which we don't advise.
Yep.
That's a killer of time free. And I had a duplex, and we 1031 exchanged into our asset class of choice, which was a mobile home park. And that was like 225, 3,000 miles away. And I remember that morning, we both were, I think we were like throwing up a little bit. Yeah.
I called Travis. I'm like, you feel like you're going to throw up? He's like, I'm so nervous. The most we'd owned is like a duplex. So we jumped in, but it takes that leap sometimes. It takes a little bit of faith and accepting fear to get to the next level. I will say about Wisconsin, a lot of these small towns are really little strong industries or economies. but they're really kind of steady as she goes. Like, for example, the park Ruby bought, it's like the population's been the same for the last 30 years. But what's interesting is the rules of forced appreciation are still true for areas like that. We don't need the area to get a lot better. We don't need a big population influx. We don't need the jobs to change massively. And what's interesting is you can get them at prices that are, I'd say, more affordable than like the West Coast or some of these really fast growing cities, because a lot of times the growth is already priced in. And so a lot of the investors are like, oh, where do I go next? Like Austin's growing really quickly, but you're like, yeah, but be careful, because you get this hockey curve, our hockey stick curve with growth in population and jobs, but you're also going to have a lot of real estate investors selling according to that price. In other words, they're taking future sort of potential when they sell. So I think the Midwest is a really interesting place to invest. The steady as she goes, but still follow the rule of forced appreciation. And we're looking at our second park out here potentially, and the first one's doing awesome. So
yeah, man, I know we've talked about this off the air a little bit, and we have properties. We started in North Carolina. We bought a Malone Park in North Carolina. That was sort of our first, like I said, that was our first larger property. That was our first property outside our backyard, and it was the first property that I think we're able to like really understand forced appreciation. Which I'll explain that a little bit, because sometimes Mitch says these fancy terms, and he doesn't realize what people are like. What the hell's forced appreciation? But before I get to forced appreciation, I've been talking about like going all in the Midwest, to be honest, and yep. Maybe I shouldn't be airing this. So it's like remember when Brandon Turner talked about how great mobile home parks were, and we were like, "Damn it, Brandon, shut up!" Like
now they're not so great. Yeah, everyone's going after
mobile park at like a 5 cap. No, but like I was, we have a lot of property in Florida, and we just dodged Milton and Helene. Did I say that right?
2 in a row.
I'm not a total.
I think so.
Yeah. And it's just like literally dodged 2 bullets in Florida. We've dodged some bullets in North Carolina. I feel like, not to get into politics about the climate, which I don't know when the climate became political, but like there's a lot more shit happening. There's more forest fires in the West Coast. Like I live in Oregon. And there's just obviously you can't sit here and tell me there's not a lot more going on when it comes to wind and rain, wind events. And so I told Mitch, I'm like, maybe we should divest of some of our real estate in these coastal towns and move it to the Midwest. Midwest is like, what happens in Wisconsin?
The natural disaster out here is going to be tornadoes. But it's it is rare though. It's not, every once in a while you'll see a tornado rip through, but you don't get the same. You don't get the hurricane. You don't get the fires. The West Coast. You don't. So I feel like Wisconsin is a very steady as she goes. The other thing too is you look at a lot of these towns and like the industry is really healthy. There's a ton of manufacturing. There's a ton of medical healthcare. There's pretty solid little towns, I think, that are looked over because they don't have the same growth as other places. But like I said before, the laws of forced appreciation still prove to be true. Forced appreciation.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Mitch. Do tell. What's forced appreciation?
It was my idea. For every dollar to the bottom line.
I don't think you invented forced appreciation.
Actually, I did. You know what? You heard it here. I came up with it. Okay. So for every dollar you send to the bottom line, you force appreciate a property, you actually appreciate the value of a property 10 to 20 times. Now, there's a formula involving cap rate and that kind of stuff, but in essence, properties trade at a multiple between 10 to 20 times their bottom line. And if you're able to make the property more profitable via rent increases or revenue increases, whatever that is, or cost reduction, expense reduction, you're actually able to force appreciate, make the property more valuable because of those changes. So like a good example, we bought a property, this little town in Washington, and everyone was like, oh man, I hope that town does well, or I hope industry comes in someday, or whatever.
We call that the golden hood.
Yeah, that's right. So we bought this property and we were like, yeah, but we don't need any of those things. As long as the area stays sort of stable, we can go in, financially engineer and do well. And we did good on that property. So forced appreciation is a really cool thing. And we've been able to, through Cadia, I think if you look at our portfolio, we've really bought in areas where other people don't always think to go, like rural areas, tertiary markets that haven't seen massive population growth, but we understand the fundamentals of real estate and we actually force appreciate the properties for a win.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And you say tertiary markets. I think some people are like, like you even talk to some lenders and they're like, oh, tertiary markets. Well, tertiary markets still might be like, what, 50,000 people or something.
Right.
And it's
They're
not
like,
like,
that's too small.
it's Dallas Fort Worth. That's too small. I'm like, good. You know, you guys go and focus on other areas because like to Mitch's point, like with forced appreciation, you're with commercial properties, right? Self-storage, mobile home parks, anything that's 5 units or more when it comes to residential apartments, is based. It's basically a business. You're buying a cash flow stream. You're buying a profitability, which is called net operating income, which is your income minus your expenses. That doesn't include your debt service or your mortgage, and that's the amount of profit a property kicks off. And the value of that property is based on a multiple of that. If you're buying in maybe more rural areas, maybe areas that are perceived to have more risk, then it's going to be a lower multiple. Like investors are going to want more cash flow for the price because they're going to want to adjust for risk. If you're going to buy in like a really nice area, maybe the property is like an A-class apartment complex, there's a ton of demand, the fundamentals are great, then you're going to get a higher multiple on that. But the point taken though is it's a multiple on a cash flow stream you're buying. And so we could look at an area and go, wow, like all this area has to do is not like disintegrate. It just needs to keep doing what it's been doing for the last, 50 years, just steady as she goes. And we can create millions of dollars in equity while other people are speculating on it. Oftentimes they're buying in areas. Oh, I'm going to buy in the next area. This is the path of progress. This is what's happening. And I'm going to hope appreciate, or I'm going to buy a house or a duplex or a threeplex. And I'm going to hope it appreciates. And that's great. I don't want to I think hope is a really bad business plan. And I like to buy areas that we're like, oh, actually this area doesn't have to do shit. It doesn't have to do anything. But we know that we can actually improve the net operating income by what we call lazy reposition. Now, lazy reposition for us is like, how do we increase profitability without spending hundreds of hours on it, a ton of stress, dealing with the city, permits, like building development or those sorts of things where you want to kind of shoot yourself. But we're like, what can we do to actually go in, put the least amount of time in, but add value? Like we're always about adding value. How do we go in? Well, having LED lights put in a mobile home park, or having a crew go in and skirt some homes, or maybe fill potholes or pave the roads, or do things that add value to the community, because you always need to add value. And then maybe raise some rents. Maybe there's some utilities you can pass through. Maybe there's some things you can do on the expense side. Again, the area did nothing. Maybe it has job diversity. We don't want to buy in areas where it's just like the one factory, the one chicken factory. If the chicken factory goes down, then the area just turns into a ghost town, or in the areas like the Dakotas with a lot of oil and gas. But it doesn't have to do anything, and we can make millions of dollars. Remember that property we bought, still own? It's in I'm not going to say where it is because I don't want anybody to know about this. I'm just joking. It's actually in I don't know. Is it in Como, North Carolina, or Murfreesboro, North Carolina? It's Murfreesboro, basically, which I think it's like one store, and there might be a
small.
Yeah, there might be and I think if you Google Como, it's literally our mobile home park. It's like, it's like we have like 80 pads. So that, but when we bought it, our thesis was people were going to be coming from Virginia. It was right across the border in Virginia. There was the lot rents were a lot higher over there. People were looking for more affordable housing. We bought that. Nothing's happened in Como. Trust me, nothing's happened there. Nothing's happened in Murfreesboro, but we bought that part for like 1.5 million. Am I saying? Oh no, 1.1, and we put about 400K in CapEx.
Yeah.
That was a little heavier lift, but that thing's worth it's going to be knocking on the door of $4 million in valuation right now. By the way, nothing's happened in Murfreesboro. Nothing's happened in Como. It's the same exact fundamentals. That's a great passive income. Like that thing cranks out a lot of cash flow.
Yeah. When you're talking about adding value, like I think it's worth talking about, the people as well, the tenants, because one of the things we found with a lot of these mobile home parks is you have 95% of tenants who are just like awesome, good people. And a lot of times when rent is artificially low and they've been sort of subsidized by the past owner, not only do you have a lot of maintenance challenges, we've seen backed up septics, we've seen overflowing culverts, dangerous situations with electrical potholes, that kind of stuff. But you also have a lot of times a tenant base, or at least a small percentage of the tenant base, that really shouldn't be in the community, that's kind of ruining it for the rest of the people. So one of the things we've been able to do is like really identify who are the problem folks, who don't belong in that community, and relocate them, which is, by the way, a very, very minority, right? In
relocate them, we rehome them like a pet. It sounds like when you said relocate.
Yeah. But really, we've had, we've had anywhere from drugs to different sorts of crime where it's like the rest of the community is going, oh my gosh, thank goodness we can have a safe community where our kids can go and play. They can feel good about that. So when you look at these properties, there's really an opportunity as a responsible owner to go in, add value, not only to the community, like physical things, aesthetic things, speed bumps, safety items, but also just like who shouldn't be in that community. And sometimes there's folks that are caught that are literally ruining it for the entire community, that need to be relocated.
Rehomed. Yeah. Your neighbors. I wonder if your neighbors feel that way about you and your neighborhood. No, you're an okay guy. Yes,
I'm a good neighbor.
Me.
My neighbors are my allies. That's that's you, Trent.
Yeah, my neighbors. I'm like, I don't belong in my neighborhood. That's for sure. So, okay. So I love that you said that, because I think there's a psychological repositioning of a property. And I'd tell people that are listening to sort of take notes on this. There's a financial reposition, which we've talked about. That's adding income, reducing expenses. That might be adding occupancy. Like if you maybe you buy a distressed apartment complex and you fix units up and you move people in, that's going to increase your revenue. If it's a mobile home park, maybe you rehab some abandoned homes, make them nice, sell them off, or bring homes in. Like those are heavier lifts usually. But we've been talking about financial reposition. And there's also something called like I said, a psychological reposition. I'm dealing with this right now. I bought this, or I invested with these guys. I've talked about this on the podcast. I won't belabor it, but I invested with these guys. They were not good people. They took money out of the properties. They basically stole the money from investors and put it in the other side. I don't know what they were doing. But when I got involved to fix these properties, and now I'm the only one there. Like Mitch knows the story. I'm like the last investor standing to fix these things. And I've got a lot of money into these things. They're in Oklahoma City. It's 200 units of apartments. But we've spent the last 18 months rehabbing, I think, almost 200 units, replacing all the sewer lines, repainting everything, new windows, sliders. We brought the pool back online. We got a better landscaping. We just made the place look really nice. Like you said, we got rid of all the bad eggs that were bringing the bad elements in, the drugs, and every time I went there the last 18 months, first time I went there, I was like, I wanted to jump in a river. I wanted to crawl under a rock, suck my thumb, and cry. I remember I called my wife. I
think you did.
Yeah, I think I did a few times to you. I was like, Mama, what did I do?
I'm like, don't cry, buddy. Don't cry.
Right. Because you're there and it's just like, there's junk everywhere. There's trash in the common areas. There's like, God knows what, like mattresses and couches on the balconies. There's rodents. There's roaches everywhere. This place. I mean, these guys, their model was to buy distressed assets and make them better. They bought distressed assets and made them worse. So, and like there was probably good people there, but they were like hiding. They weren't on their balconies. They had the doors locked, right? They were scared. Well, now we've gotten rid of the bad eggs. We've brought a lot of really good residents in. Like I said, there's pools, there's playgrounds, there's dog parks. It's like, we've really put a lot, and they see us putting a lot of money and pride into the property. And now when I was actually out there, I don't know if I told you this, I was out there last week, and it was like, oh my gosh, people had like plants and stuff on balconies. Oh, hey, Mr. Hamill. Gabe joined us. Hey, buddy.
We got Gabe in. We had some tech issues, so we'll bring him right here.
Wow. Now the fun can start. I don't know what kind of bullshit these guys have been talking about the last 30 minutes.
Now we have to tell the truth. Gabe's here.
Travis is talking about plants on balconies.
Well, I'll finish my topic here, Gabe, and I was talking about a psychological reposition. I'm thinking Gabe is in the same boat, like really distressed property. We got involved as investors. Gabe's also put a ton of money into his apartment complex out there, like fixed it up, added amenities, make it look nice. And I was telling Mitch, I was out in Oklahoma City last week, and people have before people were afraid to get out on their balconies, right? Any good tenants were like locked away. Well, we have security now. We've got rid of the bad eggs. We made it nice. They're like planting plants. There's like tomato bushes. Like people are walking around. People are happy. There's a financial repositioning of a property, but there's also a psychological repositioning of a property, which is our job as real estate investors to take care of our customers, which are our tenants.
But what a cool thing though, right? Because like as investors, sometimes people who don't understand the world we were involved with, they're like, oh, they're just after the money. They're after there's greed. There's all these things. And you're like, yeah, but like, you got to realize investors take care of the entire housing stock. We take care of all the industrial buildings, all the commercial buildings. Like the fact that we can go in and make it a win-win for everybody involved, not only financially, but like for the tenants that live there, we we take care of communities across the U.S. And you've seen countries, by the way, where the government comes in, they try to run housing. It fails every single time. There's no way they could do that.
Wait. The government don't tell me the government's ineffective at running stuff because...
All right, this is going to be a side conversation with Trav because anyway.
Yeah, that $50 billion they spent on 8 EV charging stations, that was money tax dollars well spent.
What a deal. But you see that in other countries versus allowing investors to go turn a profit to make it profitable. You think about it, it's profitable for us to go in and increase tenants' lot.
Yeah, my property manager in Oklahoma actually got the tenants. They're all going in like building a community garden, and they also built out a pond. So it's like, they're not only are they increasing kind of the, I don't know if you call it curb appeal, but just kind of the amenities of the property. They're working together and they're building a community there, which is really neat.
I walked through Gabe on that property when he first saw it, and we all both wanted to crawl under a rock and suck our thumb and cry. There was like a dog breeding pen. There was like roaches everywhere. It was like a freaking disaster.
I love the dog breeding pen. That's amazing.
Remember the guy in his tidy whities?
Do I remember? Of course I remember. That image is like burnt in my mind for sure. And the owner of that dog breeding company, his name was Spider.
Oh, I had a guy in my complex called the Saint. That was his street name. And he was my security guard that I hired. And we caught him at 3:00 in the morning carrying an HVAC unit out to his buddy's car. So not a good security guard. But I was going to say something else. What's that? Okay. So there's a psychological benefit to improving a property. There's the social benefit of improving the community for your residents. But here's a quiz for you guys. We talked about NOI, net operating income. We talked about you take your net operating income, you divide it by a cap rate. The lower the cap rate, the higher the price. And that's going to be based on the value. But what's another financial benefit of improving the aesthetics and the residents and the psychological sort of perception of a property? Does anybody know the answer to that?
No, I think from a psychological standpoint, I think you naturally are going to attract better tenants, and you're going to keep better tenants. We just did this on a property over in Eastern Oregon, a mobile home park, where our property manager really wanted to put fencing in. And my immediate thought is like, from one part of my brain is like, why would we add a fence? Because it really, like a new fence, it really doesn't add, like how much more income are we going to get? But the reality is it needs a fence. It's going to look nicer. There's going to be some natural division with having fences between the units. And it's actually going to provide a better looking property to attract better long-term tenants.
The other financial benefit to improving the aesthetics and the residents of a property, yes, you can perhaps get more, you can improve your collections, you can improve your occupancy, you can maybe increase rents. Those are good things. There's also something called cap rate compression. Like I told you, the cap rate that investors assign and how like an appraiser or a bank or other investors, how they perceive a property is the risk, right? Like I said, so they're going to say you have $100,000 in net operating income. It's an apartment complex, but it's rough. It's in a tough area. The tenants are rough. It looks beat up. So if an appraiser goes out there, an investor goes out there and they look at it, they might assign a higher cap rate. So that you take that $100,000 and you divide it into say an 8 cap, and that's the value they're going to give. For those of you that are listening, get your calculators out and take that number, right? But let's say you go in and you fix it up and you make it nice and you fix the community and you paint it and you put some amenities and you mow the lawn, pick up the trash. Well, so that same appraiser that goes out there or the bank or other investors, they're going to look at that and they're going to perceive that property as having less risk because it's nicer. It's got nicer tenants. It has amenities. It just looks cleaner. So they might assign a 7% capitalization rate or a 6.5% cap rate. Well, that same complex, still doing, both of them are doing $100,000 a year in net operating income, but the value of the nicer complex is going to be way higher. And cap rate compression is something I think a lot of commercial real estate investors forget about. I know I sure do. Like we're always just looking at net operating income, cap rate. And Mitch and I are always like, well, we mow mobile home parks in small areas. We just kind of use the 7% capitalization rate. But but we've improved an area, and we have properties that we could probably assign a 6 cap to now. And that we have a lot more value than we actually think because the perceived value and the perceived risk is a lot better.
But I think there is a perceived value too, right? When someone walks up to a property, whether it's residential or commercial, mobile home park, multifamily, doesn't really matter, single family, like there is going to be kind of going back to that psychological piece, like how that property makes somebody feel like and even an appraiser, like they're going to look at, they're going to look at numbers, they're going to look at comps, they're going to look at NOI, but you're right. A property, the way it looks visually too, is going to be, they're going to take into account not only a tenant, but also, yes, an appraiser, possibly an inspector, depending on, maybe you're doing a refinance, maybe you're doing a purchase, maybe you're trying to pull some money out, right? And they're trying to get a value out of that property, but a perceived value definitely plays a piece.
So if you're looking at amenities for the perceived value, a community garden is perceived a lot better than a pit bull makeshift breeding fenced in area.
I feel like that's all I'm going to take away from this call is how do we install breeding pens in our properties?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly. Cap rate compression is a real thing. Perceived value is a real thing. By the way, Gabe mentioned another thing people forget about. I talked about refinance. Oh, wow. So I buy a property worth $1 million. I improve the net operating income. And then maybe I also improve the perceived value, the aesthetics. And now I get a lower cap rate. So now the property is worth $1.7 million. Well, when I go to a bank and the appraiser comes out and looks at that, they're going to give me 75% of that value, which means I can pull money out. And remember, that means I'm accessing the equity that we created through forced appreciation or lazy reposition. And now when I get that money back, I can redeploy it elsewhere and get a yield on that money. We call that the velocity of capital. How quickly can you move money in and out of a deal? And by the way, what else is the benefit of that money? It's tax-free. The government doesn't tax that because you're putting debt on that property. I think a lot of people forget that. And that's a really powerful tool that we use in real estate.
I think it all goes hand in hand. Like kind of going back to that fence example, right? It's like one part of my brain goes, well, why would adding a new, nicer fence around the property and separating the units, like, could I really get higher rent? I mean, most of these are long-term tenants, but there are some vacant spaces. And so it does create a better living environment, right? Like you improve a mobile home park, you improve a multifamily property, you have the community garden, you bring in a playground, whatever it might be, you're going to attract better quality tenants. With better quality tenants, you may get higher rent, and that will also help increase the NOI and the total value of the property. So all those little things really do kind of go hand in hand and work together to improve not only the lives of the tenants, but also the value of the property. So everybody wins in this scenario.
I love that. One of the ways I look at properties is like every single property is in some sort of spiral, whether it's a downward spiral or an upward spiral. And like our job as entrepreneurs and real estate investors is go in there and put the right things in motion to start the spiral in the right direction. And like Travis took a property in Oklahoma, and I know you've done the same, Gabe, where it's like in a terrible downward spiral. The day you walked on the property, you're going, oh my God, this is crazy. We've done the same thing in North Carolina. We've done it in multiple places.
I think it already hit the ground.
It's like a straight,
like 5 feet
it's
under.
like straight down. But like that comes to, like what an incredible story and like thing to accomplish, to take an entire community. And most of the people, by the way, want an upward spiral, but they can't do it themselves as tenants. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're talking about several layers of management, a whole team to go in, like North Carolina, for example, when we have backed up sewers and there's crime and there's all these things, cars are driving way too fast. It's not safe. We were able to put the right things into motion. And now the community itself is taking pride in its own community. And they're taking care of the playground. They, like you said, they're planting plants and gardens, and they care about the safety. And so now it's in an upward spiral, and it's our job to make sure that it stays in the right direction. And I think every property, like most properties, are going in some direction. And if it's going in the wrong direction, what do you need to do to change the direction of that asset so that your tenants step up and say, look, I'm proud to be here. I like it here. I feel safe here. And now I'm going to start contributing to the community. Even the good tenants don't contribute to a terrible community. They hide, like Trav said, they hide.
I think the other side of this equation too is you could also, and the thing that I think younger and newer investors need to be careful about is over improving a property. So like when I started investing, I was buying occupied properties. They weren't in the best condition. They were in livable condition, right? But they were old. Some of them were outdated. But it was in a market and in kind of a sub market where as tenants moved out, if I were to put, which at the time, those early years, I didn't have money in the bank to do this. So it actually worked out really well because I had no temptation to do it because
you were broke.
I couldn't do it, right? But in that neighborhood, you could do a $50,000 kitchen remodel and you probably really wouldn't get any more rent. And so I see a lot of younger, newer investors, especially in the single family space, or they're trying to do some kind of flip or where they put so much money in because they're turning this into a dream home. They're putting things in that there's not a real return. So you got to be really
stuff they want. I want that countertop.
What they want.
I want to put.
So going back to that, like kitchen remodel, you can spend $50,000 and you get maybe $20 more a month in rent. Like do the math on that. Like it's not worth it, And so I think people need to be careful, especially these new investors. Like make sure if you're putting money in that there is a way to get that out. Like there's nothing wrong with beautifying a property, but I've watched so many people spend so much money and then they're into the property too deep and they cannot get that money back out. They can't get higher rents. They can't get a higher value in the property.
Well, that goes back to really understanding the market and then like really understanding every dollar in. What does that mean? Because $1 in, like you said, could also be 20 cents out or 25 cents out versus $1 in is $2 or $3 back out. And we analyze deals all the time, like on the, inside of our elite mastermind. And that's what we do is we're looking at properties going, look, if we go in with $100,000, here's what that's going to mean for rent. That's what it's going to mean for cash flow, for value, all of those things. And then we can weigh that and say, look, is this a good investment or a bad investment? Because you're right. You don't want good dollars chasing bad because it can go in the other direction as well, for sure.
And most markets have a cap of in all asset classes of what something could rent for too, right? And so sometimes the difference between a property that has slightly outdated whatever amenities or finishings isn't going to rent for that much less than a property that has high end. In other markets, it's going to be significantly different where it might be worth putting a little money into certain things, but you got to know your asset class and you have to know the market and more importantly, like the sub-market within the market. There's parts of town here where the sub-markets are very different and what you might put into a property would vary greatly on what you would get out of it in terms of rent.
Yeah, notice when Mitch was saying like $1 in, 20 cents out, there's a few different economic metrics to look at. One is just like what's your return on investment? If I put $100,000 in and I increase my cash flow by $20,000 a year, well, that's a 5-year payback. That some might consider that good, some might not consider that great. But also that $20,000 a year in extra net operating income divided by a cap rate is the value. Remember, it's a multiple. So maybe it's 10 to 20 times that multiple. Okay, well, now that's different. I've created a lot of extra equity. I've force appreciated it, which now I can tap that equity through a line of credit, or I can tap that equity through a refinance, a cash out refinance. So it's, when you're putting $1 in, look at how much equity you're creating in that property, but also look at the amount of cash flow. And something else that we do, people are like, well, what do I do then? Like, what should I do to improve this property? And we used to sort of guess like, oh, I bet they would love a playground. And then you find out there's like no kids. Like, so like, oh, no one's going to use the playground. So like, or do we do a community garden or do a dog run? Or we're always looking for like, what's the higher value items that the tenants are going to appreciate, but aren't like heavy lifts in time and money. And one thing that we just started doing, this is actually our CEO's idea, who runs KDE Capital Group, our investment company. She goes, well, I don't want to close on a park. Why don't we send a survey out to all the tenants? And I don't know how people feel about that. We're like, okay, do it. You actually get a lot of really good feedback. We got some great feedback. There were some things we were going to do, some big heavy lift items in those parks that we thought the tenants wanted because it was going to cost a lot of money. And the stuff they wanted actually wasn't that expensive. It was like, I want when obviously junk cleaned up, and we really like to move the dumpsters to the other side of the park because it's hard to take our trash over there. You're like, well, that's easy. Like that's a really, and so then when you get that survey and then you do those things, that shows your tenants that you listen and that you care, which makes them more sort of loyal to your community. So that's another tactic that we use. I don't know how you feel about that, Gabe, about putting a survey out to your tenants after you close, but it seems to work for us.
It's not something I've ever done, but I definitely I try to look at the most cost-effective solutions first, right? So specifically in the mobile home park space, a lot of times it is junk cleanup. And so one thing that we've done, my property manager, anytime I've bought in a mobile home park, anytime I've purchased a park, my property manager will usually send out a notice and say, hey, this park was purchased. The new owner is willing to cover for just this one weekend dumpsters and anything, Because a lot of times it's the rules that weren't previously being enforced. And so tenants will have a bunch of crap outside that's just kind of piled up throughout the years, and it makes the park not look so great. So a lot of times a notice will go out and say, hey, the owner's going to pay for these dumpsters. You have the next 2 days, whatever those days are, to come dump things. Sometimes we even paid laborers to come and help them dump things in. And then once that initial cleanup's done, then the property manager kind of really enforces those rules of like, if people have, 100 tires piled up or whatnot. But I always look at the most cost-effective solutions first. Like sometimes it's enclosing the garbage area just because it looks gross. Sometimes it's filling in some of the potholes. But the park cleanup has probably been the most cost-effective and easiest, fastest way to like clean up a park in a short period of time without spending a ton of money.
100%, man. We do that all the time. We kind of use the carrot and the stick. Like, these are the rules. You will be responsible for keeping your area clean, but we're going to help you because they oftentimes don't have a lot of place to store for storage. So yeah, we bring in the dumpsters. I love that, hiring day laborers to help. Some people don't have. They might be older, to help them get their trash out. I mean, who wants to look out your kitchen window to see someone else's toilet in their yard? Like, no one wants to see that. Get rid of all that. But there's sort of a double benefit. Obviously, there's a benefit to the residents because it's a cleaner park and it looks nicer. But again, it goes back to that, this is a better park. Rules are enforced. They have better tenants. The perceived risk is lower. The value is higher. And then you can access that equity. So and we call that's like center cut, lazy reposition strategy. Just picking up the junk. That's so easy and so inexpensive, but so impactful. So yeah, anyway, I love that. Hey, I got a question for you, Gabe, since we're just sort of spitballing here. What would you tell yourself if you could go back to Gabe, who's just getting started, like hasn't even bought a property yet, is just like, realize, read Rich Dad Poor Dad like you did, realize that you're going to scale a real estate portfolio that allows you to generates enough cash flow that allows you to sort of quit your day job. You don't really know anything. You're starting to look on Craigslist. I know your story. It's a cool story, but like, what would you go tell yourself? You sit down with younger Gabe. What would you tell yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that I would, if I were to do it all over again or like going back, I would do it very similarly, right? I looked at a lot of deals. I built a lot of relationships, had a lot of conversations. I told everybody what I was looking for because I think, the old saying of like luck is just preparation meeting opportunity, right? And then being ready to actually move forward on those things. So I think that we are all surrounded by real estate. All of us, like most of us live in some type of property. And I say most because, you get those people that want to go live off grid in the woods, whatever. But the majority of people, they live in a property. They are surrounded by properties they either own or they rent, single family, multifamily. They're around real estate, right? And we're all in the game, the financial game in some aspect. And so I look at life as a game. And if I'm in the game and and money is part of the game, I want to win. I want to achieve success so that money and finances is not a stressor in my life. And so I guess this is a long answer to answer your question, but going back to those early years, the thing I would tell myself is the same thing that I told myself back then. Buy as much cash flow real estate as I can. And if you have no money, find no and low money down seller finance deals. Find ways to get creative. I didn't do a lot of partnerships early on, but it doesn't matter. Like either seller financing, private money, hard money, partnerships. Buy as many cash flowing assets as you possibly can, because over time, those cash flowing assets will add so much value to your life financially from a time freedom standpoint. It just gives you more opportunities, more choices, so that a decade later, you have more levers to pull. You can refinance, you could sell, you could, reposition the property. You can, increase rents and increase cash flow. I mean, there's so many more opportunities that I have today because I made the decision to buy real estate, but you have to trust the process. You have to have those conversations. You got to look at deals. A lot of people want to invest in real estate, but they've never looked at a property. They've never looked at a profit and loss statement. They've never made an offer. They've told maybe one person that they're interested in investing in real estate. So I think all those things are important.
I like how your approach, because you approach real estate differently than me when I first started. You approach real estate as in what we're doing. I want to generate enough cash flow to retire. You know, it's funny. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I listened to it, and it did change my life eventually. But like, I missed a very important lesson, and that was really the freedom piece, the cash flow piece. So when I started buying real estate, I started buying land because I was going to do spec houses, and spec is short for speculation. And I think what I would tell myself would be, because I wasn't approaching it from a cash flow perspective. I actually had a good paying job. I was making decent money. So that almost I think that was actually a crutch of mine that hurt me. You didn't have a good paying job, a well paying job. And so you that was your focus, which I think aligned things well for you. Because what I would tell myself, don't focus on speculation, focus on cash flow. I would also tell myself, understand that multiple doors are better than one door. Because I did have a single family house, and I had some land that I was paying interest only notes on. And then 2008 hit, and it just kicked the shit out of me. And I did have this duplex that did well. And I remember going, more doors is better. That property was fine. So I would probably say, start with a single family house, figure that out. But the sooner you can get to a duplex or a threeplex to give us some more cash flow, spread some risk out across multiple tenants, I would have absolutely been a lot better off. I also would have told myself, go read David Lindahl's book, Multifamily Millions, and understand what forced appreciation is, because that was this magical tool that I honestly didn't understand. And I know you probably didn't either, Gabe, because you're buying single family houses, so you can't apply forced appreciation to single family houses. But I would have said, understand that. Maybe don't go buy a 5 or a 10-plex just yet, but understand the power of that, because if you can control the outcome and control the amount of equity that you can create in a property, you control your life.
I was going to say, yeah, I did that kind of by accident in some way. So it was really 2009. I was buying small multifamily. I was buying, 2 to 10 unit, 2 to 8 unit type properties. By 2014, rents were up. And so these properties appraised out 70% LTV, and I was able to refinance because I forced appreciate them. I was able to get better tenants paying higher rent. I had the market on my side, cap rate contention, right? So it's like all these things were on my side. And it was almost by accident, but it was still the simplicity of buy a property that cash flows, increase rents, force appreciate. And so, yeah, I don't know that I really understood increase NOI, the kind of how commercial properties work and increases value. But I knew, hey, I was getting higher rents and the market was starting to go up. Therefore, I get a higher appraisal.
I don't know why it's worth more, but I know it's worth more because the property produces more cash flow, and something that produces more profitability and cash flow has got to be worth more. Something I did want to unpack something you said earlier, and we've said this a couple of times, and I think this concept is proven even more true than ever over the last couple of years. And that's when you have a nice, solid cash flowing real estate portfolio with solid equity in it, you do have options. Because I'm going to tell you, people that tell you that you can go for 20 years, invest in real estate and it's all butterflies and bunny rabbits, they're full of shit. Things happen in real estate, right? We invested with the wrong guys. Maybe you made a mistake in your underwriting. I don't want anybody to think that it's all butterflies and bunny rabbits. But so yeah, I made a mistake by investing in these guys. Sometimes stuff happens, but man, by having a large portfolio with a lot of equity and cash flow, you have options in life. Like Gabe said, I could go sell off some property. If I need to generate cash fast. Yeah, it's not super liquid, but if you have enough property, there's things you can sell and move pretty fast. Or better yet, I hold and I refinance and I can pull cash out and I can move that money maybe to cover some gaps in another asset that I have, or something happens in life that's completely unrelated to real estate. Having a large cash flowing real estate with equity gives you lots of options.
Always. I am always, and I've said this so many times, I am always in a better position because I own real estate. I just have more levers to pull. And it goes back to those early years of making the decision to just buy some fucking real estate. And I think that's the part that a lot of people get caught up on. That first property, rarely is the first property going to be the property that gets you wealthy. Rarely.
Might be a single.
But that gives you the confidence and experience to do the next one and the next one and the next one. And these are stepping stones. And yes, sometimes you have people that are buying 200 units for their first deal. Most investors, that's not the case. But you do a deal and you do another deal and you realize this is not that hard. I stick to the fundamentals. I buy another property. And it's, the more you put yourself out there, the more conversations you have, the more relationships you build, the more opportunities you're going to have. There's opportunities out there. I mean, I've heard people say the opportunity of a lifetime comes around every day, right? And so you need to be in a position to be ready to take down those opportunities when they come, or to just see them when they're right in front of your face, because someone could put a great deal in front of your face. And if you don't know that it's a great deal, what are you going to do? You're not going to buy it. But if you've built the relationships and you know how to fund this thing, whether it's, seller financing, private, hard money, partnerships, whatever the reason, like if you have those relationships and then that's right in front of your face and you're in a position to actually take that property down, then you're investing in real estate. Having the information and not being ready to pull the trigger, you never end up with any real estate.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. I have an example of that. So I had always dabbled in single family houses, duplexes, and maybe that kind of stuff. And you're right. I didn't understand a lot of the fundamentals we teach in our elite program or school of scale. Like I didn't understand. I'd crested the first phase of what we call the R1 framework. I did something. I did 0 to something, right? A house hacked. I did a duplex. Great. But I never left that phase. I spent the next 15 years not understanding the power of force appreciation and cash on cash and these sorts of things. And, but I mean, man, knowledge, people say knowledge is power. Knowledge is damn near free.
Knowledge is only potential power, only potential, because knowledge without action is nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was taking action. I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. And so action without knowledge also is dumb, but knowledge doesn't take knowledge. Read our book, read David Lindahl's book, it's not these, it's like a $20 investment. Like these aren't complex topics, but the example I was going to use, I remember somebody brought me a 16-plex in my hometown. It's funny. Mitch saw this 16-plex too. I didn't even know Mitch at the time. We both looked at it. We both had just been dabbling in shit, that small stuff. And we passed on it because the cap rate was low. We didn't understand the upside, like the rents were way below market. We didn't understand anything about like force appreciation, that we could literally, and someone bought it and we thought, if their cash flow is going to be crap. That guy like force appreciated $1 million and sold it in a year. We're like, oh, because he had knowledge. So yes, absolutely. It doesn't take, 12 years plus graduate school to get your knowledge in this stuff. It's not like Gabe said, it's not complex, but yeah, get armed with knowledge. We always say fast knowledge and fast action. And yeah, absolutely. Because we also see people that can underwrite a property from soup to nuts, from A to Z, understands all the formulas and the concepts, and they never, ever pull the trigger. So you definitely got to have action with knowledge for sure. Gabe, another question for you, because we're getting close to the top of the hour, but this is something I did want to ask you. Is there one thing in real estate that surprised you as you went along? So like look back on it now, something that was like a pleasant surprise, or maybe not maybe it was an unpleasant surprise, but it was something that happened. Like I know my answer, but like you look back like, man, that was actually really surprising. Like I didn't know that was another benefit I got out of real estate. That was something I never thought of when I was starting.
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind is I've heard other people say it, and I know we say it now, is that buying bigger properties is easier than buying smaller properties. I understood it conceptually. It wasn't until I started buying bigger properties that I realized it was easier. And when I say easier, it's like to buy a duplex isn't that much. It's really not any easier. And in some ways, it'd be easier to go buy a 30-unit apartment complex, right? Because commercial property, they're basing it off the value. They're basing it off the NOI of the property, right? So those 1 to 4 unit properties, the value is really based on comps, on what someone's emotionally willing to pay for the property. So the first time I really had that aha, and I've shared the story probably on this podcast, is I had this little 4-unit property, but I got a commercial loan on it. And I bought this property for, I think it was $475, something like that, $480. But the units were all way under rented, but they're locked into these leases. And when those leases expired and I got new tenants in there at market rent, that property that I paid $475 for appraised out at $860. Now I know I said 1 to 4 units, but I got a commercial loan. So because it was a commercial loan, they were basing it on the NOI. So based on the NOI, just getting now keep in mind, I got a hard money loan that supported the property at the $475 purchase price because I made my offer of $475 based on the current rents. I knew those current rents in those 4 units were about half as what market rent should be. So that property still cash flowed, not a ton, but still cash flowed the day I bought it with hard money based on those current low rents. But when those tenants vacated in their lease and I got tenants in at market rent, that property appraised out for $860,000. And that was my first kind of like, oh shit, they took the income approach. This is worth $860. This thing almost doubled in value because the rents had gone up almost twice as much. Their rents were up at market, and that's what they're basing their value off of the NOI. And that was the first aha of like, I conceptually understood it, but then I realized like, wow, if I can increase the NOI of a property, if I can decrease expenses and increase revenue, I can create a ton of wealth. And I've done that in the multifamily, in the mobile home park space, commercial space. Like it can be done. And it's these little levers you can pull by decreasing expenses and increasing revenue, or you can create millions and millions and millions of dollars in equity by these small moves and understanding the value of a property on that income approach, on that based on NOI.
How much money did you put down that particular property?
I do remember because I had a hard money lender at the time that was willing to finance a lot of properties for me, 100% financing, because they knew the market and I was getting a lot of great deals under contract. This particular deal, she said, I don't like this as much as you do. So if you really think it's this good of a deal, put $50,000 down. And I knew, so I was like, fine. So I put $50,000 down. Well, when I refinanced that, when it appraised at $860, I pulled like $70,000 out. So I ended up being into that property, no money out of pocket. It appraised at $860. I showed her that $860 appraisal, and she's like, all right, you were right on this one. Right. And so I put $50,000 down, and then a year later pulled 70 out, had the rents increase, had that high appraisal, and I was into that property, no money out of pocket.
Yeah. So you're into that. You're into a property, no money, essentially in 12 months. But the thing you didn't mention is you created almost $500,000 of wealth.
Yep.
How long would it have taken you to save $400,000? Like most people can't save that in 12 months. That's a lot of money to save, but you created that. You created wealth out of thin air because you knew the end game, right? You came in armed with knowledge. You knew that those rents were under market. I always say that, like, man, like force appreciation is power. And that was, people buy single family. I love single family houses. I know we've had guys like David Osborne, and people on this podcast that have made hundreds of millions of dollars with single family houses. I'm not poo-pooing it, but I'm also saying that's sort of the thing where you own a bunch of single family houses and you just hold them and cash flow them, and and 10 years later, you look at your portfolio and you're like, oh my gosh, these things are worth way more. That's cool. And you have a lot of wealth built up. Sometimes it takes a lot longer. You buy a multi-unit, a 5-unit, 10-unit, 20-unit, 50-unit complex. You know damn well what the value of that property is going to be in the next 10 years. You pro forma that out or faster, even the next 2 years.
And you can mitigate your risk, right? Like when I bought that property, I didn't base my purchase price in the terms of the financing that I got based on what the property could do. Because I looked at it like, okay, I know this market really well and I know where rents should be, but what if I'm wrong? If I'm wrong, I don't want to overpay based on the current numbers. So that's how I mitigated my risk. Now I was able to actualize the rents that I thought I could get because I knew the market. But say I couldn't, or say the tenants, stayed in there after their lease and went month to month, or I had a hard time kicking them out, like the property still would have performed, right? And so that's how I mitigate my risk, is by underwriting a deal based on actuals. And it's the same thing I've done in the mobile home park space. I'm like, all right, I'm going to base my price off of how the property is performing today. Now I know I can force appreciate through this upside, lazy repositioning, decreasing expenses, increasing revenue. But if I didn't, would this property still work today? And that's how I like to mitigate my risk is, does it pencil today? And historically, has it penciled with these current rents? If that's my worst case scenario, is how the property is performing today, then I'm very comfortable with that.
Yeah, you're not negative. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's also a lot of people, they'll look at a property with rose-colored glasses. They're like, oh, I can raise rents to this, and it's going to be worth this much, and I'm going to be high-fiving. A lot of guys did this before the debt this debt bullshit that happened. And you're like, oh, then I'm going to refinance it and I'll get a 4% interest rate. And you're like, oh, wait, turns out it's 8%. Turns out it's 10%.
You know what I used to do that I forget to share is I used to always create 3 performas, right? Because for one, if a broker sends me a performa, it always looks good. I've never seen a performa created by a broker that wasn't like, oh my gosh, if no unit ever becomes vacant and you increase rent by 10 to 15% and there's no maintenance and repair, if everything goes perfect, this property.
And you manage it yourself, it's a 10 cap. And then in small words, performa,
right?
Cap.
So I've never seen one that didn't look good. But what I used to do is take the actuals and then I would create 3 performas. I'd create kind of like a very, very conservative, like an actual, like, I guess worst case scenario. I'd even bump up vacancy a little bit. I'd bump up maintenance and repair a little bit just to give myself that room. Then I would create like a very conservative performa. Then I would create a best case scenario performa. Now, sometimes the market, that best case is what is likely to happen. But if I only base it on that, then a lot of properties that were okay look like home runs. I'd rather be conservative with my numbers and then surprise myself the other way and go, oh yes, I was able to achieve lowering these expenses. I was able to achieve increasing revenue. And now the property is performing in this best case scenario. But I like to kind of plan for that. I guess plan for the worst and then create the best.
Yeah, shameless plug. If for those of you that would like a nice pro forma tool, you can join the 0 to 100 school scale. We have the 0 to 100 advanced pro forma tool. I love that tool because you can change the different inputs. And you can see how does that affect, obviously, things like you can change, like you said, actually, what if my vacancy is 10%? What if my collection loss is 10%, 5%? What happens if I don't get this occupancy? Or let me go in and add a higher expense ratio, or like you said, there's more maintenance. You can see how that flows through cash on cash. You can see how that flows through value, equity multiples. If you're partnering with people with capital, you can see how that affects investor returns. You can put different debt in there as is, and what does a refinance look like? What if I refinance at 60%, 70%, 75% LTV at 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? What if my rate 6, 7, 8%? And you can create all these different variables. And you can sort of see what the economic picture looks like. I guess I'll answer my own question before we get out of here. What's the one thing that surprised you? Yes, I would say absolutely. Bigger properties. It's like, man, I would say buying a duplex was way harder for me than buying my first mobile home park. 100%. Because they're looking at you. You're having to do tax returns since you were like 3 years old. Blood types, urine samples. I'm joking, but like it's a deep dive. Or as mobile home park was like, yeah, this is a great property. It's a 10 cap. Good cash flow. Yeah, we'll give you 75% LTV. Like, do you want to know anything about me? Yeah, send your PFS, your personal financial statement, which is something you prepare. You send it over and like, yeah, you look good. Anyway, because they know if you don't pay them, first of all, they know the property generates enough cash flow to cover the debt service with a nice margin. That's called the DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. And they also know if they somehow, for some reason, if in the unlikely event, because the properties are cash flows nicely, if they have to take it back, they know that they can turn around and they could that property has enough cash flow. They could, it's a good asset. Way better. They're going to look at the asset as collateral more than you. The other thing that I think I realized over time is how powerful it is to have scale, to have a larger portfolio. Like you go, we have, I think at KD Capital, we're knocking on the door around like 450, 500 units. And if you go through and raise rents $25 a month on all 400 to 500 units every year, and eventually you have 1,000 units or 1,500 units, that's really impactful. You take the $2,500 a month, multiply it times 450 to 500 units, multiply that times 12 months. That's a hell of a lot of cash flow. That's just simple math, but it's exponentially more powerful.
Compound
not to mention
effect.
the amount of not to mention the amount of equity you've created across the board. Like Mitch and I, sometimes we look at that like, oh my gosh, like we just do a $25 rent raise, which is a modest rent raise or across the board. And the impact is massive. So that's why we're always like bigger properties can get you there faster. And remember, man, like it could be one property could change your life. Like maybe you've done some duplexes, threeplexes, you understand forced appreciation, you get the game, you go find a 50 to 100 unit apartment complex or mobile home park or self-storage. That could make you a multimillionaire and generate enough cash flow to retire you. We did that with one of our investors with a nightly stay RV park. The guy makes $10,000 to $20,000 a month on that thing. It's crazy. So yeah, one property can change your life. Anyway, we are way past 11 o'clock. I don't know what happened to Mitch.
This will be a weird podcast. I mean, I think the first 30 minutes were you and Mitch. I had some issues getting on, and then it was you and me. So I I hope we provided some value. If we said one thing that made your brain tingle a little bit and think differently, then I think we did our job. I think it's time to call it a show and get over to our elites for our mastermind call, where we dig deeper into all things buy and hold cash flow real estate.
Yeah, the last thing I'll mention, I feel like the show was a lot better the last 30 minutes. I'm not sure exactly what changed, but I just felt like we really hit our stride, when Mitch dropped off and Gabe dropped off.
I don't know how the first 30 minutes was, but I say thank you, and I say fuck you for Mitch, because that's what he'd probably say to you.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, everybody, thank you for joining the 0 to 100 podcast, where we are all about cash flow real estate. And by the way, we'll talk to you guys next week.